Fujifilm X-H2s, Fujifilm's new flagship mirrorless APS-C camera that you can get for around $2,500. Now this camera is causing some chatter among the cameraverse, which is definitely a thing I just made up, but for good reason. Last week, we took it out to Manhattan Beach to test out some of its photography capabilities. This week, I want to do a more in-depth analysis of the camera itself and focus a lot on the video side of the camera as a videographer myself, and given that this camera has some awesome hybrid options, specifically in the video realm. It does some really impressive things. So without wasting too much of your time, let's get into it. To start, the camera has a really modern look and feel to it. I like the grip especially. It's like a very deep grip. And in terms of buttons and switches, it's not too busy for my liking. There's just enough on the camera that make it easy to use but not overwhelming, which I think is something Fujifilm has always done a good job with. Specifically, the ports I think are where some of the Fujifilm users will get excited. So now there is a full-size HDMI port, there's a microphone and a headphone jack. There's also a USB Type-C port, and my personal favorite feature of the physical build of the camera itself is the fully articulating screen. I think if you're gonna make a hybrid camera, especially one that is meant for videographers, video creators, content creators, vloggers, anything like that, an articulating screen is key. I mean, my A7 III did not have one, even this A1 that I'm shooting with now does not have one. And using something like the A7 IV, also, that's a very exciting feature for me, is that articulating screen. You're just able to get more angles without a monitor needing to be attached and be able to see everything more easily. So I do love that Fujifilm has included the articulating screen, which I don't know why it's such a big deal. I feel like every screen should just be articulating. Just give me the option. But if you disagree, let me know why in the comments below, because I am curious for other people's thoughts on that. Aside from the body and the build of the X-H2s itself, Fujifilm is also offering some accessories that could complement it really nicely, especially as a hybrid camera. The first of which is a new battery grip that's going to cost you around $399. This battery grip is going to allow you to hold 2 extra batteries. It's definitely an accessory that keeps both photographers and videographers in mind. Who doesn't want more battery life? So that's a nice touch. The next accessory that Fujifilm has developed that I found really intriguing is an attachable fan that you can add just right onto the back of the camera, pretty seamlessly in fact. The fan's going to cost you around $199.99, and it's said that it can allow users to shoot up to 51 minutes in 4K in pretty extreme heating conditions. I believe I read 40 degrees Celsius. Someone please do a Fahrenheit conversion for me. So that with the battery grip I found were 2 really interesting accessories that again are going to help you build out the camera just a little bit more without necessarily breaking the bank for something like a full-on rig. So after a day of shooting photos and some video at Manhattan Beach, I later took the Fujifilm X-H2s to Prospect Park to more thoroughly examine the video capabilities of this camera. Quick shout out to Fujifilm, who along with the X-H2s also lent us their new 18 to 120 millimeter LMPZ WR lens, which is an f4, which I don't know if I said in the title there. PZ is for power zoom, very exciting. And their less new, but equally exciting Fujinon MK 18 to 50 millimeter T2.9 Cine lens, which I thought was awesome. While this video isn't by any means a full in-depth review of these lenses, I do want to talk about my experience using especially the new 18 to 120 f4 with a camera like the Fujifilm X-H2s. Being a hybrid camera, I thought that lens was an excellent option for Fujifilm to develop and come out with at a time where they came out with this camera. So starting with the new 18 to 120 millimeter f4, it is a great pairing with this camera. That range is unbelievable. It's weather sealed, it has power zoom, and it gives you a lot of options with that power zoom as well. It's really lightweight, even though it looks like it's on the larger size, but honestly, it's a lot lighter than it actually looks, and it sells for around $899.99. So it's not gonna break the bank, and it's gonna do a ton for you. It's one of those lenses that's just gonna be your workhorse lens. If it's one of your first lenses, it's just gonna give you a ton of options to shoot almost anything you can think of. The power zoom aspect of it specifically has a lot of good options. So you have 3 options to control the zoom on this lens. I do like Fujifilm giving you full functionality out of the power zoom, because otherwise, really, what's the point of the power zoom? I also found that this lens paired with the X-H2s had really solid autofocus. I noticed a lot of reviews had pre-production models, and some of them had issues with the autofocus on their pre-production models. And I myself also had a pre-production model, but I did not find any issues with the autofocus. It was very fast. For what I needed to use out of it, I found that the autofocus was able to focus on my subject really quickly. I think it excelled with an individual subject, which is obviously always going to be lighter work for the camera. And it did what I needed it to do personally. And it impressed me compared to other Fujifilm cameras that I've used in the past. So I thought it was a big leap forward for Fujifilm to get that autofocus to a point where it needed to be in order to compete with these other mirrorless cameras like a Sony or like a Canon, who have pretty spectacular autofocus nowadays. Then that, paired with the X-H2s's improved in-body stabilization, really made a difference for handheld shooting specifically. The X-H2s now offers a 5-axis stabilization mechanism, giving 7 stops of image stabilization, making handheld shooting a real option with this camera. Otherwise, on a gimbal, I would probably just leave it off and let the gimbal do the work. Again, it is a vast improvement, and it's a good option to have. Now I will say, because I was shooting with both the 18 to 120mm and the 18 to 55 Cine lens, having them side by side did leave something to be desired out of the bokeh from the 18 to 120mm f4. Obviously, you have some limitations, only being able to stop down to f4, but it's hard to complain too much considering how much range you're going to get with this lens. You can't really expect a lens to, go any faster than f4 at that range. It did leave something to be desired out of the bokeh, especially because I had my images side by side with a lens like the MK18 250 Cine lens, which, gotta say, was so much fun to use, and I love the image I was able to get out of that lens, especially paired with the X-H2s. Having a parfocal lens itself always opens up a world of creative possibilities, and most importantly, I would note that I like that with the X-H2s, you can pair it with a lens like the 18 to 120mm f4, and you can pair it with a Cine lens like the MK18 to 50. The fact is, you can rig out this camera as much as you want or as little as you want. As Fujifilm's flagship camera, they're really giving you the option to make it into a full mini cine rig, or use it as a handheld, on-the-go piece of equipment. And having the 2 lenses on the same day really showed me what this camera was capable of. This new Fujifilm camera has a ton of new components that are going to make it a really interesting competitor with the likes of something like the A7 IV or the Panasonic GH6, given that they're around the same price point. To start, you will get the ability to shoot 4K 120 with a 1.29 crop. And if you don't want to shoot in 120, or you don't need to shoot in 120, you do have the option to shoot 4K 60 to 24 uncropped. And one of the more interesting features they've included in this camera is the ability to shoot internally 6.2K ProRes. That's going to give you a 3:2 aspect ratio, which you can see here. Having the ability to shoot 6K ProRes is pretty exciting, and is going to help differentiate it from something like the A7 IV. As for video codecs, yes, you get a ton of video codecs, H.264, H.265, and a ton of ProRes options, which, if you like shooting ProRes, is probably going to help you on the editing side make your programs run a bit more smoothly. Lastly, let's talk image quality. With this camera, you have the ability to shoot 4:2 to 10-bit ProRes HQ, ProRes LT, ProRes Proxy, H.265, ton of options in that 4:2 to 10-bit color with the 6.2K or with the 4K, which is going to give you a pretty outstanding image from the bat. And that, in addition to what I think one of my favorite new features of this, is the F-Log2, which is a new picture profile that Fujifilm has come out with this camera. I like shooting log. I personally think it's going to give you the best possible image if you are able to pull it off. And with F-Log2, they say that you get 14 stops of dynamic range, which is pretty unbelievable. That paired with the 422 10-bit is going to give you a pretty dynamite image out of camera once it's color graded. And I think that's a really exciting thing that they've done with this new camera. As a videographer myself, the options you get out of the X-H2s in that department, I think are great. You get a myriad of possibilities with this new camera, being able to run and gun with it, being able to rig it up to a more complex system. The autofocus is fast and reliable. The articulating screen is a great touch and something I don't even have in my Sony A1. The ability to shoot in a variety of codecs is a huge plus. And again, your ability to shoot in that f-Log2 profile is gonna get you great image quality. Obviously, users who are faithful to their brands are probably going to stick with their brands, but I'm really curious how it does with those users who want to up that tier of mirrorless cameras that they're using and go into that $2,500 price range of camera. While personally having the ability to shoot 6K doesn't necessarily mean too much for me, I could see how it would get a bunch of users really excited for that, along with all the codecs that you have and the ease of use of the Fujifilm brand itself. The fact that it is also an APS-C camera does bring up a whole philosophical debate between APS-C and full frame, which is maybe a subject we can touch on more in another day. However, as an APS-C camera, you should be able to pair it with more affordable lenses that are also more lightweight. So that is a perk, but also consider that you will get a crop on those lenses. Overall, this camera was really easy to just pick up and use. Its video options were vast, and I really like it as a hybrid option in today's market. I want to say thank you again to Fujifilm for lending us this camera along with the lenses. If you guys enjoyed this video, as always, consider subscribing to our channel and leaving a like. And please don't forget to leave any questions you have in the comments below. Thanks guys, have a good one.